The Chronicles of Uzaya, a novel by Robert Ray. This audiobook is narrated by Silas Grim, an AI voice built from scratch. No human voice was used in the recording of this audio. Chapter 1. The Orphan in the North. Snowfall silences the peaks above Holford. Wind sweeps along ridges of weathered granite, whispering through pine forests in a tongue older than memory. In the heart of a blizzard, beneath a fractured overhang of stone, a child lay abandoned. He was wrapped in a torn wool blanket far too thin for the cold, left beneath the rocks like something discarded. His ears bore the unmistakable taper of the drow. Yet his skin was pale, wrong for their kind, whose flesh runs dark as coal, black as volcanic stone. He had no name, not one that mattered. He would not survive the night on his own. Just before dawn, mountain clerics found him, drawn by faint cries threading through the wind. Mountain clerics. That's what the people of Holford called them. They were a small, secretive order who kept to a stone enclave in the lower mountain range north of Holford. No one knew the name of their faith. They tended the wild places, offered aid to the unfortunate, and asked nothing in return but to be left alone. Two of them patrolled the ridges that morning, keeping the high paths where travelers sometimes strayed, driving off predators before they learned to linger too close to the enclave. They heard the child before they saw him, a frail cry carried on the wind. Beneath a snow-covered outcrop of rock, he rested. One knelt and pulled back the snowy blanket, surprised by the babe's resilience in the unforgiving cold. Sharp ears, skin pale as milk. Even as a babe, the child bore long wisps of silvery hair. The other cleric's expression tightened when they saw him. Cursed. But their faith demanded charity. They could not leave him. They wrapped him in a dry blanket and bore him back in silence. They named him Split Blood, with voices that mingled pity and suspicion, for the mingling of drow blood with that of surface folk was held as ill fortune by the people of the northern realms. They raised him in their crumbling enclave, a cluster of stone buildings clinging to the mountainside, home to clerics, their families, and a handful of children. A place where ancient religious law was valued higher than warmth or kindness. They fed him, they housed him, they taught him prayers, but they did not touch him with affection. Duty without love, care without warmth. The clerics raised him because their faith demanded it, not because their hearts chose it. When he bled, they bandaged him in silence. When he spoke, they answered with scripture. When he reached for comfort, they offered none. Among the children in the enclave, he found no companionship. The little ones learned to fear him from their parents' quiet warnings. Most his age had largely been sent away to apprenticeships or family holdings. The few who remained cast stones when the elders turned their gaze. Others simply avoided him, as though his blood might stain them by proximity. Eventually the anger came, hot and sharp, but useless. A child cannot fight the world. Protest brought nothing but more stones, more scorn, more cold nights sleeping alone, just far enough outside the enclave where no one would bother him. As it does when it cannot breathe, his anger turned inward, settled in his chest like a winter that never thawed. Once, when he was 12, a cleric's daughter visiting from the lowlands offered him bread from her own portion. She was perhaps 14, with sun-toned skin and eyes that didn't calculate danger before speaking. "Split Blood," she said. "Why do they call you that?" He didn't answer immediately. The other children noticed the conversation between the two and stopped eating, watching with sideways glances. Because, he thought for a moment. Because I'm half, he said finally. Half what? Drow. Half, he struggled to finish. Human. Her brow furrowed, thinking. My mother says the Drow built cities underground before the Storm Kings came. She says they were architects. He blinked. No one had ever told him that. She says that? He asked quietly. The girl nodded. Before the Great Wars, before everything, she lowered her voice. Before the Storm Kings drove them all away. He'd never heard anyone speak of it so plainly. The other races were ghosts in the histories the clerics taught. Mistakes, corruptions that had been corrected. What happened to them? Papa says they either fled or died, or became mixed, like you. A cleric's hand fell on her shoulder. Firm, not rough, but final. Celine, your father is waiting. The girl rose, bread still in hand. She looked back once as she left. I think half architect is better than no architect. He watched her go. She never returned to the Enclave. He never saw her again. But he remembered the bread and the word architects. By his 14th summer, he could skin rabbits without trembling. Not because he was brave, because no one flinched when he bled. He learned early that the world does not care whether you tremble or not. By his 16th year, any such trembling had left him entirely, as though fear had grown tired of him and moved on. He named himself Uzaya. No ceremony, no declaration, just a word he spoke once in the woods, alone. He liked the sound of it, and it fit better than split blood ever did. He didn't know it was an old word, or even what it meant. He spent more hours beneath the forest canopy than among the stone walls of the Enclave. The wilderness did not mock him. The cold did not resent him. Animals did not throw stones. He learned which herbs brought healing, which mushrooms nourished and which killed swiftly, and how to follow scent and wind to game or shelter. The forest was his, in a way that silence belongs to those who do not break it. One morning, sent to check trap lines in the highlands, Uzaya wandered farther than intended. Snow lay thin across the plateau where he stood. In places, the wind had scoured the ground to bare rock. The pines grew sparse and crooked, their roots clawing into stone like fingers trying to hold on. And there, rising above the tree line in the valley below, he saw it for the first time. The Shattered One. An ancient structure, a pyramid of black stone thrust up from the earth like a broken tooth. Its glossy surface caught the soft morning light and bent it. Not quite reflection, not quite absorption. The light returned at angles that didn't match the stone's planes, subtle enough that he had to squint to be sure he was seeing it right. Where the surface remained whole, it was pristine black, impossibly unblemished despite the centuries. But the apex was gone, snapped clean away, as if some enormous force had gripped the peak and broken it off. What remained was a shattered crown, jagged fragments of black stone thrust upward at broken angles, edges sharp enough to cut the sky. Deep cracks radiated down from the ruined summit, spider webbing through the gloss like fractures in dark ice. The Shattered One loomed over the canopy, taller than the chapel bell tower, older than any story the clerics had ever told. When he made his way to the forest's edge, he stood staring. The air near it felt different, pressed, like something heavy rested on his chest. The snow didn't settle on its surface the way it should. It slid off, melted, vanished. Even the wind seemed to bend around it. He took a step forward. Boy. The voice stopped in cold. One of the clerics stood at the edge of the clearing, breath misting in the air. His expression was hard. You don't go near that place. Uzaya said nothing. The Storm Kings shattered it, the cleric continued, his voice tight. Thousands of years ago. They couldn't unmake it. No one can. It's older than our faith, older than the kingdom. And it hasn't forgotten what it was. He stepped closer and grabbed shoulder, not gently. What was it? Uzaya asked innocently. That is not for you to know, he said. No one goes there. Not hunters, not priests, not fools. Not you. Do you understand? Uzaya nodded. The cleric released him, turned, and walked away without another word. Uzaya stood there a moment longer. He did not forget. Over the next 2 years, the wilderness around the Shattered One became his hunting grounds. The clerics never went there. The other children wouldn't, and that made it all the more his. He learned the trails, the game paths, the places where rabbits burrowed and where winter winds funneled through the ridges. He learned to move quietly, to watch without being seen, to kill silently and without hesitation. He ignored the cleric's warning, walked right up to the base where the black stone met the broken earth. Touched it. Nothing happened. No curse, no lightning, just cold stone under his palm, smooth as glass. He found an entrance, a dark mouth at the pyramid's base, where the structure had collapsed inward, rubble spilling down into passages below. He didn't go deep, but he explored the outer ruins, the terraces and shattered steps that clung to the pyramid's flanks. The wildlife was better here, richer. Deer grazed in the clearings near the base. Birds he'd never seen elsewhere perched on the broken stone, unafraid. The forest felt older, thicker, more alive. And the pyramid itself, despite everything the cleric said, felt peaceful. He had a favorite place. He would sit in its shadow, back against the black stone, and feel the cold seep through his clothes. So quiet there. No voices, no insults thrown, no eyes watching with pity or scorn. Just him and the ruins and the wind moving through the cracks. The pyramid didn't judge him. It didn't care what his blood was or what the world called him. It was just there, ancient, broken, enduring, like him. By the time he turned 18, the Shattered One had become more home to him than the Enclave ever was. In the spring that year, game was plentiful in the high country. Uzaya scouted farther than usual, following deer trails into terrain he hadn't fully explored, venturing along the ridges and pine stands north of the Shattered One. The sky darkened to a flat, lifeless gray, the kind that promised nothing good. The wind was picking up. The air grew heavy, rain-laden, and electric. Thunder rumbled in the distance, low and threatening. The temperature began to drop, and for a moment he considered turning back, but the thought of returning empty-handed drove him on. When the rain finally fell, it was too late. The storm broke. Sheets of rain pelted down, the wind tearing through the trees. Thunder cracked closer now, almost overhead. Lightning lit the forest canopy in sharp, white bursts. He made his way toward a rocky outcropping he had spotted through the trees, a cathedral spire of jagged stone jutting from the hillside. As he drew closer, he saw a narrow opening at its base, half hidden behind twisted vines. He pushed through and ducked inside, shaking the water from his hair, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness while the thunder rolled on outside. The cave mouth was narrow, choked with rubble that had fallen from above. He squeezed through a gap just inside the opening, Beyond it, the space widened. Inside, he was dry and sheltered. The air here was cold and smelled of mildew and wet soil. The chamber hadn't been occupied for years, probably longer. He brushed the dirt from his hands and clothes and looked around. The rain and wind reduced to a dull, distant rumble outside. His first realization was that this was not a natural cave. The walls were too deliberate. The ceiling curved smoothly overhead, though parts of it had fallen away over time. He went deeper, away from the rain-soaked entrance. Veins of obsidian ran through the cave walls. The volcanic rock held a dark sheen, black and glassy, like the shattered one. The passage ended at a wide alcove. The air was stale. His breath carried in the stillness. The smooth stone altar had been hewn from the back wall, waist-high, carved with faded symbols he did not recognize. Resting on its surface, beneath a thin layer of sediment and dust, lay a pendant tied with a cord of leather still intact. He lifted it, brushing away the grit. Rhombus-shaped, black metal edged in silver. Etched lines covered the pendant's surface, spirals and angles that seemed to shift when he was not looking directly at them. He felt it, a vibration, subtle but insistent, crawling up his fingers and settling at the base of his skull. He stared at it. The spirals seemed to move, patterns morphing beneath the surface, as though it was alive. Yet someone had left this here, deliberately, placed it on the altar like an offering. It had been here for years, decades. He reached out, his fingers touched the pendant, and in that split second, the world tore open. Visions. Not sight, not memory. Something imprinted in color and form. A corridor of 7 arches, carved from white granite and standing in perfect alignment. Light flickers through them. No, not light. Something else. Something drawing him closer. Through each one, the space beyond bends. The angles do not hold. Distance folds in on itself, then stretches out again. He can't move, can't breathe. The arches duplicate, slide out of sequence. 7 becomes 14, 21. The corridor has no end. A city. Buildings of stone and timber sinking into their own foundations beneath an orange sky of embers. The ground fractures. From the rupture, a pyramid of black stone drives upward. Light, no, something harsher, erupts from its upper terraces in rigid bands, slicing across rooftops. Streets collapse, towers split. Figures scatter and vanish into widening voids where the earth has torn open. And above it all, peering through the sky like a giant wound that will not close, a horrible eye, vast, infinite, watching. It sees him. He tries to pull back. Can't. The taste of copper floods his mouth. Blood. His hands burn. His chest tightens with pain. The pendant is killing him. He knows it. He can feel it. His heart slowing, his lungs collapsing, everything in him shutting down. The corridor folds inward. The arches collapse into a spiraling void, into flames, into... then nothing. Uzaya woke, gasping. Sound returned first, dripping water. His own breath, ragged and too loud. Cold stone against his back. The cave. He was still in the cave. His hands stung. He looked down. Blood. His fingers were raw and bleeding, like he'd been clawing at stone. Soil caked under his nails. He spat, dark blood pooling on the cave floor. His clothes were soaked, not from rain, but his own sweat. How long had he been here? The pendant was still resting on the altar where he'd touched it, unchanged. Just black metal. But he felt its presence. Somehow, he stared at it, aware of the space between one breath and the next. Slowly, with hand shaking, he reached out again. He closed his fingers around it. This time, nothing. He picked it up and slipped it over his neck. It settled against his chest. A faint heat spread where it touched his skin, welcome against the cold of the cave. Outside, the storm had faded to distant thunder. The forest closed around him again, pine needles soft underfoot, the creak of old wood bending in the wind. But for Uzaya, something had changed. Somewhere beyond space and outside time, something vast and patient took notice. Chapter 2. The Pendant's Call. In the weeks after Uzaya found the pendant, the world began to treat him differently, though nothing he could name had changed. The mountains stood where they always had. Pines bent beneath familiar winds. Snow fell in the same silent patterns. Yet it felt as though the world now regarded him from a slight remove, watchful in a way it had not been before. Where once he could approach animals like old friends, especially the smallest ones. Now they scattered at his presence. Rabbits froze in their burrows as he passed, eyes wide, bodies locked. Birds fell silent. His reflection in icy streams hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, before moving with him, as if checking first whether it should. The clerics noticed as well. Their cold reserve hardened into unease, distance kept without explanation. They asked no questions, and even if they had, Uzaya would have had no answer for them. Unease regarding the split blood spread through the enclave. Families who had tolerated him before found new reasons to turn away, and prayed he would simply go. Through it all, the pendant sometimes vibrated in time with Uzaya's heart, a rhythm that did not match his pulse so much as answer it, like something listening from the other side. He slept less. When he closed his eyes, he felt something immense pressing at the edge of his awareness, present, but just out of reach. The visions came more frequently now, not only when he touched the pendant, but in his dreams, in the narrow spaces between thoughts. White granite arches stretching into the distance, a pyramid grinding upward through stone and fire. The eye, vast and patient, fixed in a torn sky. He didn't understand what it meant, but he knew he couldn't stay. 3 weeks after finding the pendant, Uzaya left the enclave without ceremony. He took his bow, his knife, and the clothes on his back. No one stopped him. No one said goodbye. The clerics watched him go from the stone archway, silent as ever. He didn't look back. The wilderness swallowed him whole. He wandered south through the highlands, following game trails that led nowhere. The pendant pulled him forward, but he had no destination. Just finding purpose in movement, adding distance from the place that never wanted him. Days blurred together. He ate when he could, slept when exhaustion forced him. The visions grew stronger, sharper, more insistent. Then, one cold morning days later, he woke with blood in his mouth, bloodied fingers, dirt in his wounds, just like the time he first found the pendant. Too weak to hunt, thirsty and without food, Uzaya was coming apart in mind and body. He was lost. The visions give him no rest, stalking his sleep and his waking thoughts alike. By the time he reached the lowlands, he could barely walk, his mind splintering beneath relentless, unnerving visions. That's when Arkan found him, a figure wrapped in tattered robes, stitched with bone and leather, face veiled, a twisted wooden staff in hand. He did not ask if Uzaya needed help. He moved as if the decision had already been made. "You're dying," Arkan said. Not a question, a fact. Uzaya said nothing. Couldn't. His legs gave out. Arkan caught him before he hit the ground. The last thing Uzaya saw before darkness took him was his own pendant, glowing faintly against his chest. And Arkan's eyes, barely visible through the veil, fixed on it, with recognition. When Uzaya woke, he found himself warm, wrapped in blankets in a small hut. Firelight flickered across rough-hewn walls. A pot of something simmering sat near the hearth. Arkan was across from him, silent and watching. "Where am I?" Uzaya managed to say. His throat was parched. Arkan didn't answer immediately. His eyes were locked on the pendant around Uzaya's neck. "How long have you carried that?" Arkan asked quietly. Uzaya's hand went to his chest. "Weeks, maybe a month." "And the visions?" "How did you?" Uzaya started. "Because I know what it is." Arkan leaned forward. "I've seen such a pendant before. There's more than one, you know, scattered across the world. It brings nightmares and fever, bad omens. But it is an ancient thing." Uzaya said nothing. Didn't know what to say. "For rescuing me," he said finally, voice hoarse. "How can I repay you?" Arkan's gaze steadied. He looked at Uzaya for a long moment, as though measuring something beneath the surface. "You aren't through yet, boy. Those visions have just begun. Grant me 13 days to teach you what I know of the Ancient One, to whom that pendant belongs." Uzaya didn't hesitate. The next morning, Uzaya woke to find Arkan sitting by the fire, turning something over in his hands. A wooden box, small, worn smooth by age. "You're awake," Arkan said without looking up. "Good. We begin today." Uzaya sat up, blankets falling away. His body ached less. The fever had broken. "What's that?" he asked, nodding toward the box. Arkan was quiet for a long moment. Then he set the box down and looked directly at Uzaya, or rather, at the pendant hanging around his neck. "I told you I'd seen one before. A relic like yours," he said. "What happened to it?" Arkan shook his head once. "I carried it 3 days." He gestured toward the box. "Still have it. Dug it up." His voice stayed flat. "I buried it after," he said. "Swore I'd never touch it again." "Why?" "Because it showed me things I didn't want to see." Arkan stirred the fire. "The visions came every night. A city burning, black stone rising from the earth, and something watching, something older than time itself." Uzaya felt cold despite the fire's warmth. "The eye." Arkan's head snapped up. "You've seen it?" "In the cave, when I first touched the pendant, and in my dreams since." Silence stretched between them. The fire crackled. "Then you're further along than I ever was," Arkan said quietly. "I could take it off, and the visions would fade. Can you?" Uzaya thought of the weeks since the cave. The visions bleeding into waking hours. Animals fleeing his presence. His reflection hesitating. He realized he had never once tried to remove it. "I don't know," he said. "Then you're truly bound." Arkan reached for the wooden box. hesitated, then pushed it aside. I won't show you mine, won't risk waking it again, but I'll teach you what I know, about the order it represents, about what's coming. What is coming? Archon met his eyes through the veil. The veil guard only rise when the balance has already failed. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of drills, ritual, and discovery, all of it leaving Uzaya exhausted. Each morning, Archon taught him the warlock's path, not spells or incantations, but discipline of will and force of mind. How to shape thought into hex and bolt. How to brace the mind against what moved unseen. How to draw on spiral and ley line currents without being consumed, and bend that power into form. They practiced until blood ran from Uzaya's nose, until his dreams spoke in elemental languages that predated words, until the pendant burned hot against his chest, and the eye opened in his sleep, gazing upon him, vast and patient and knowing. Archon never pushed him beyond what he could endure. He watched, always watching, as though waiting for something to surface. The pendant, however, remained a mystery to them both. On the 5th day, they sat outside the hut. The afternoon sun was weak through autumn clouds. Uzaya's hands were scraped raw from practicing channeling exercises against the focus stone. Blood had crusted under his nose from another nosebleed. He wiped it away as Archon handed him water. "Your endurance is impressive," he said. "You're stronger than any I've trained." "Trained? How many?" "Enough to know." Archon settled onto a log, staff across his knees. Few follow the warlock path. Most who hear the call refuse it. Those who accept often don't survive it. What makes it different from other magic? Source. Archon gestured vaguely. Wizards study. Sorcerers inherit. Clerics beg. Warlocks? He tapped his chest. We bargain. Bound to powers beyond mortal comprehension, in exchange for knowledge, for strength, for purpose. The Ancient One, Uzaya said. Among others. But yes, the pendant marks you as his, or rather, as someone his order found worthy. Archon paused. Do you know what the Veil Guard were? Uzaya shook his head. An order, ancient beyond reckoning. They served the Ancient One when the Drow walked the surface world in daylight, before the Sundering, before their retreat back to the deep. I thought that was a myth. Myth is just history people stopped believing. Archon drew in the dirt with his staff. The Drow once ruled both above and below. The Veil Guard maintained the balance, kept spiral corruption from spreading through the ley lines, kept the entire system running. What system? Gates, pyramids, obelisks, networks of blackstone that resonated together. I don't know the principle, but the effect was undeniable. They could darken the sun itself. Archon's voice dropped. The umbral field, that's what I've called it. Technology and magic woven so tightly, you couldn't separate them. Uzaya thought of his visions, the Black Pyramid rising, daylight turning to darkness. What happened to the Drow? The spiral. Archon slowly scraped the drawing away in a circular pattern with his stick. Corruption, chaos. It spread through the ley lines like poison through blood, and it spread in the hearts of the people as well. The Veil Guard tried to contain it, with limited success. Ultimately, they failed. Once the umbral field collapsed, the tribes of the surface world gathered forces, became hostile, as you might expect. The Drow retreated to Thalvorith, their realm deep beneath the earth, scattered, hidden below. And the Veil Guard died with the old order, or so everyone thought. Archon looked at the pendant around Uzaya's neck. But their relics remain, and if the pendants are waking... He trailed off. What? It means the balance is failing again. The spiral is spreading, growing more powerful. Archon stood. That's a Veilguard problem. The last Veilguard I read about died 300 years ago. Archon leaned in and looked directly into Uzaya's emerald eyes. Know this. Those who wear the relics of the Veilguard will certainly be caught up in whatever comes next. Archon gestured towards the pendant. And that's one of them, right there, around your neck. The training intensified over the following days. Archon pushed harder, taught faster, cognizant that time was running short. Uzaya felt the urgency as well, the visions more insistent. Something was calling to him, south, always south, towards something he couldn't name but felt in his soul. On the 7th day, Uzaya asked about the pendant again. Archon didn't answer immediately. He stirred the fire, added wood, let the silence stretch. Then, it's not yours. You're its. The sooner you understand that, the longer you'll survive. Uzaya said nothing, but he knew it was true. Archon studied him for a long moment. Uzaya, he said. Mistwalker in the old tongue. Did you know that? No. The mist knows. Archon turned back to the fire. On the 9th night, Uzaya couldn't sleep. The visions had been worse, more vivid, more insistent. The fire burned low. Archon was reclining across from him, awake as always. The man seemed to need less sleep than any person he had ever known. You're troubled, Archon said. Not a question. The visions, they're getting clearer. Tell me. Uzaya hesitated. Sharing the visions felt like exposing a wound, but Archon waited patiently, staff resting against his shoulder, and said nothing. I see a city, Uzaya began, built on water, districts stacked on each other like a broken staircase. Eldenport, Archon said immediately. The great port city, south of here, on the coast. Something is rising beneath it. Massive, black stone, forcing its way up through the earth. He paused, the vision still vivid. And when it comes, molten rock comes with it. The city burns. Archon was quiet for a long time. The fire popped. An owl trilled in the distance. I've seen fragments, Archon said finally. In my own visions, years ago. Black stone, cities on fire, but never so clear, never so specific. You believe me? The visions show what is, what was, or what will be. Archon leaned forward. How much of the city do you see? Just the breach point, or more? More. Uzaya's hands clenched. The sky changes, turns dark, like looking through old stained glass. An amber haze. It covers everything. The Umbro field, Archon whispered. He stood abruptly, pacing. The Drow, it has to be. They're the only ones with knowledge of the old systems, but they've been silent for 3,000 years. The pendant warms with the visions, Uzaya offered, like it wants me to go there, to the city. Archon stopped pacing, turned to look at him. Then you will. The pendant is pulling you toward whatever's coming, toward Eldenport. He resumed his seat. But not yet. You're not ready. The visions will kill you if you don't learn to weather them. How long until I'm ready? Archon was quiet, then spoke. 4 more days. I'll teach you what I can in that time. They sat in silence, watching the fire die. Deep in Thalvorith, the chanting began. The final days passed too quickly. Arkan taught with urgency, drilling techniques and warnings into Uzaya until exhaustion claimed them both each night. And every day, the pendant's pull grew stronger. South, toward Holford, toward Eldenport beyond, toward the Black Pyramid that waited in his visions. On the 13th day, Uzaya woke before dawn. He didn't leave a note. He gathered his things, stepped through the door, and walked south into the misty morning. He didn't like goodbyes. When Arkan woke and found him gone, he already knew. He sat by the fire, staring at the empty space where Uzaya had slept. The wooden box on the shelf caught his eye. The box he'd kept buried for years. The box containing his own pendant. His fingers twitched toward it. Arkan had told Uzaya that if the pendant chose, it would not let go. His own had never chosen him. The visions faded when he removed it. Eventually. Now another walked that path. Bound more completely than Arkan had ever been. Walking toward the mysteries he had once feared. Arkan stood, crossed to the shelf. His hand reached toward the box. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But as the dawn light crept through the window, something shifted in him. Some old certainty cracking. Some buried purpose stirring. The pendants were waking. And perhaps, just maybe, it was time to stop running from what that meant. He turned away from the box. But he didn't push it back into the shadows. He left it on the shelf, waiting for when the visions returned, for when he could no longer refuse. Uzaya continued south toward Holford. The pendant hummed against his chest, warmer now, restless. Somewhere between time and eternity, between waking and dream, the eye had opened, and it did not blink.